We're live. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are here to talk about the huge impact that Seaspiracy is having around the world. It's trending on Netflix. It's hitting the top of the charts. We have some very special guests joining us to discuss the film, its impact, and the actions that we can take to save the oceans. My name is Amy Jean Davis. I'm the founder of LA Animal Save here in Los Angeles. I'm here with Anita Kreintz, the co-founder of Animal Save Movement. And Anita, please go ahead and introduce the first panelist.
Hi, it's with great pleasure that we introduce Kip Anderson. His awakening as a filmmaker came as a result of An Inconvenient Truth. After seeing the film, he dramatically changed his lifestyle and believed he was doing everything he could to help the planet. But his life took a different direction when he found out that animal agriculture is the leading cause of environmental destruction. He directed Cowspiracy, The Sustainability Secret, and What the Health, and is producer of Seaspiracy. We have a short question for you, Kip. First of all, Ali credited you with choosing Ali as the protagonist in Seaspiracy, and that really helped make the film very relatable and authentic. And our question for you is, what are some of the big impacts Seaspiracy has had that surprised you?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. And just it was co-directed with Keegan Kuhn, another awesome filmmaker, part of the team. And what'd you say? How did it impact?
What are some of the big impacts Seaspiracy has had that have surprised you?
Well, it's gotten huge. I mean, it blew away even Netflix's predictions of how big it got, and I think just the amount of attention it got. I was very confident that it would. But it's just great to see, you dream of this, but actually really hitting a mainstream demographic, and just finally having the oceans and the fishes represented for the first time, not only in mainstream, the environmental movement and mainstream media and mainstream masses, but also in the animal rights movement as well. So it's great. It's just hitting on all these different points and different demographics.
Thanks. Amy, can you introduce Lamya, please?
Yes, this is Lamya Essemlali. She is co-founder and president of the French branch of Sea Shepherd and co-directs Sea Shepherd Global. She holds a Master of Environmental Sciences from the University Pierre et Marie Curie, specializing in the conservation of biodiversity. Lamya has participated and organized more than 10 missions at sea on an international level. Antarctica for whaling, Galapagos Islands for the protection of the UNESCO-listed marine park, the Faroe Islands, which is the greatest slaughter of marine mammals in Europe, the Mediterranean, protection of the bluefinned tuna, West Africa, which is the largest illegal fishing zone in the world, plundered by foreign fishing fleets. Lamya is also the author of a book of conversations with Captain Paul Watson entitled Interview with a Pirate. So our question for you, Lamya, what is the biggest threat to the oceans, and do you think that Seaspiracy covered it effectively?
Well, obviously, the biggest threats over the ocean survival is our endless appetite for fish, and also our lack of empathy and lack of care for fish, which allows us to kill billions of them without even thinking about it. And yeah, I do think Seaspiracy did an awesome job in trying to put the spotlight on this issue that is very, very hard to bring forward, because we do talk a lot about plastic and also climate change. But when it comes to what's in your plate, people don't want to hear about it. And that's also why the dolphin bycatch campaign that is also pictured in Seaspiracy is so important, in my opinion, because dolphins help us attract attention to what is happening with the fisheries themselves, because they have that capital of sympathy. People do care about dolphins. So that helps to protect fish, even if people don't care about fish, not as much as they should. So yeah, I think Seaspiracy is a mind-opening documentary. In France, so far, it hasn't been as big as in English-speaking countries because, well, French people are not that great with foreign languages, and so far it's only French subtitles. So I do hope the French version of Seaspiracy is going to come out soon, because it's definitely going to help to promote the documentary. But those in France who have seen it have been like shocked in a very good way. So definitely positive.
Excellent, thank you. And do we have Peter with us, or are we still waiting for Peter? Okay, I guess
still waiting.
Okay.
Okay. I have the pleasure of introducing Phillip Wollen. Phillip Wollen was vice president of Citibank, and by the age of 40, he'd witnessed cruelty so egregious, he decided to do all he could to alleviate suffering and give away everything he owned and die broke. Today, he is a venture capitalist for good causes, supporting some 500 mission-oriented projects for children, animals, and the environment in more than 40 countries. Phillip awards the annual Kindness Gold Medal to people who have devoted their lives in the service of others. He is a long-standing significant supporter and volunteer with Sea Shepherd. His Kindness House project hosts more than 45 NGOs rent-free in Melbourne. Our question for Phillip is, what was your takeaway from the movie based on what you witnessed firsthand when you were on the Bob Barker ship off the coast of Africa?
Well, I saw most of the egregious suffering firsthand on the Bob with Peter. But to frame the idea, I think we just need to look at the dynamics. In human history, only 100 billion human beings have ever lived. 7.5 billion people are alive today. And we humans torture and kill 2 billion sentient, living, loving animals every week. And we stab and suffocate 1 billion ocean animals every 8 hours. If human beings were killed at the same rate, we'd be wiped out in 1 weekend. And trillions of fish are now ground up into pellets to feed the livestock. Vegetarian cows are now the world's largest ocean predators. Now, we all know that these oceans are dying in our time, and they are the lungs and the arteries of the earth. They sequester more CO2 than all the forests of the world put together. And 10,000 entire species are wiped out every year because of the actions of one. So if this trend continues, no child under the age of 5 is ever going to reach retirement age. It's a mathematical impossibility. So now we face the 6th mass extinction in cosmological history. If any other organism did this, a biologist would call it a virus. It is a crime of unimaginable proportions. But to bring it back to the oceans, the human species had its lowly origins in the ocean. As Richard Dawkins said, our 185th millionth grandfather was a fish. Now, isn't it ironic that we humans, a gluttonous reptilian-brained mammalian biped with an opposable thumb, is poisoning the oceans, our birthplace, and killing our cousins who still live there, and ourselves in the process? So when I was on the ships and with Peter, I looked at the logbooks of the fishing ships, and I realized they were not catch records. They were actually murder-suicide notes written by a stupid species. I realized that we're not special. We are statistically a rounding error. We're not fallen angels. We are risen apes, and we are writing the requiem for the planet. And that was the takeaway I took after being with Sea Shepherd for 15 years, seeing firsthand what happens out there on the water and on those coastal territories where poor people are starving because of the egregious cruelty and greed of richer nations.
Well said. Let's take a moment on all of that information. Thank you, Phillip, for saying all of that. we're in a particular situation, and it's difficult to understand why more people aren't concerned, especially people who have kids under 5. Just for an example. Okay.
I'd like to say something about Seaspiracy, if I could. I said something before we started. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely.
We just have a conversation. I'm so grateful to Kip. I've been a friend and admirer of his for so long, and he's a terrific fellow. In 1962, Solzhenitsyn wrote a book called One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. And this book made no impact at all. It simply settled gently into our consciousness. And in 20 years' time, a subtle thing happened. The book changed the way we saw Russia, and it changed the way the Russians saw themselves. In 1975, another book had a similar effect, Animal Liberation by Peter Singer. And it had no effect at all at the time. But within 20 years, every initiative in the animal rights movement has Peter's fingerprints on it. So now I think I can actually say with confidence that Seaspiracy will create a paradigm shift in the way in which we see and treat the oceans and all the individuals who live there. And I promise you, and I give you my word, a time will come when civilization will owe people behind Seaspiracy a debt of gratitude they could never repay. I want to thank everyone involved in making this terrific film.
Thank you. Beautifully said. And Ali said in an interview with Plant-Based News that basically it was a small crew. It was just Ali, Lucy, and Kip sort of, doing the filming and then editing and then bringing others on board. So it was a very small group of people that is behind a paradigm shift. So it's incredible. Amy has a question regarding how it's impacting the public. So Amy, do you want to ask?
Okay, so Seaspiracy is trending on Netflix. It's top 10 in more than 57 countries. So my question is, why do you think it's capturing the attention of the public in such a major way? And this is for anyone.
I think it's striking at the core of you kind of, making these films over the year, Cowspiracy with the Health. It hits at a certain time in history. Like Cowspiracy felt like it hit at a perfect time. It was 7 years ago. And What the Health, and you see game changers pop out. And then now it's the oceans. And there's some ethical films coming out too with the animal rights movement. I just feel we're a species that's kind of ascending of our consciousness. It's kind of coming full circle as us, actualizing our dream of becoming human beings. And so I think it just hit at a perfect time, and people are just so shocked because it hits not only intellectually but also at the heart of like, wow, this is how amazing the ocean is, how it's intertwined to everything in the environmental movement. And then to see the fish that you just don't see on an everyday basis, how shocking some of the images are, but then you learn about the fish sentience that's been largely ignored. For a big reason, most people didn't know about it. So it hits on all these different heart chords, mind chords, logical, and at the perfect timing. So it's just all these things coming together. It's just the perfect timing, and just really grateful that it happened.
And Kip, what actually prompted you to get involved with this film, or what motivated you to be a part of the journey that is Seaspiracy?
Well, if you look at Cowspiracy, we had a part on the oceans. It was only about 5 or 6 minutes, and each one of those sections in that film could be turned into a whole film. We wanted to make that one about ethics and about health, and we realized, wow, after Cowspiracy came out, Ali, only 22 years old at the time, was exploring these same issues in the ocean. And Keegan, I think Keegan actually found him, and exploring the same questions. Is there such thing as sustainable fishing? Like, is there such thing as a sustainable land animal farming, as they call it, land animal killing, really, for food? And he was working on this, and this was a long time ago, 5 years ago. He actually helped us with What the Health and said, hey, let's turn this into a full film. Let's make this a global film and uncover and see if there is a possible way, any possible way to dig and dive deep if there's such thing as a way to sustainably fish at all. And so the journey started almost 5 years ago. It took a long time. But so one more example of, it was just a small team. It was them two doing all the filmings and me helping with the editing. 2 or 3 people can do a lot. The other films were just Keegan and I. So it's good motivation for anyone out there. A camera and a computer, you can do a lot and surround yourself with some talented people like them.
Excellent.
Thank you. There are so many layers in this film. We did a poll on our Animal Safe Movement Twitter account asking what topic from the documentary had the biggest impact on people. Corruption received the most votes with 35%. Hurting sea animals came second at 28%, followed by environment at 23%, and contaminated fish at 14%. Do these results surprise you, and how can we further engage the public so that the outcome is that more people switch to plant-based, as is the first call to action on the website?
That's really cool you did that. That's really neat. The corruption in the films, I think it's really about, it's just so shocking when you look at the environmental groups, and it's the Ocean and the Greenpeaces. These are the ones that are supposed to be protecting the ocean, that we look up to as kind of our environmental parents, that they're the ones giving us the information. And then to find out, our environmental parents have been betraying us. It's kind of it's a story of betrayal. It goes back forever, in time of why that hits so hard to people, because these are the ones we look up to. And that's interesting that you did that poll. But I don't know what the other question I got caught up in that poll, but that's really, really telling though. And I think it's just one of those, it has to go back, and once you have it revealed, what can you do about it as a viewer? Because you can't always trust the mass media and these people who you feel like you can trust. It's another reminder of that in the time, especially in the times we live in.
Yeah, I guess my follow-up question was, first of all, this poll was to a general public, so we paid for we paid for the poll to go out to a general audience, not our followers. And I guess the question is, like, one of the big outcomes of this film is people are changing their behavior. And your first call to action on the Seaspiracy website is for people to switch to plant-based to save the oceans. And do you think these different reasons will propel them to do that?
I think definitely these are big reasons. Another one that's not on there, would be great to see if there was one about fish sentience, because that was a topic we would have loved to gone 20 minutes into. It was only about 5 or 7. And the book by Jonathan Balcom is interviewed in the film. It's called What a Fish Knows. And I feel towards the end of the film, that's what, because I asked always people, what was it? I'm not going to fish anymore. And I was asking them, what particular was it in the film? A lot of people said it was towards the end of the film when the whaler from the Faroe Islands, you just inherently want to hate him because he's killing these whales. And then he's saying, hey, you can look at me, but if you're eating fish, if you're eating chicken, they all have their own life. And that's what a lot of people really refer to that made them make the switch to not only eat fish, but all animals. Like, wow, yeah, if I'm mad at someone killing a whale, how can I eat a chicken or a salmon or some other animal? Because they all have an individual life that want to live. And so I feel that's a big thing. When you realize the sentience of fish, and as Phillip said, these are our cousins. They're our great-great-great-great-great-grand. We come from the ocean. So I feel that's a big one as much as anything else.
Thanks. Lamya and Phillip, in the film, Bycatch are the invisible victims of the fishing industry. What have you personally witnessed? Lamya, you say a recent discovery that Sea Shepherd has made is that 10,000 dolphins are being killed every year as bycatch on the French Atlantic coast. The French government has been hiding that for at least 30 years. How is the film changing public knowledge about bycatch and corruption in dolphin safe labeling, quote unquote, verified by Earth Island Institute?
It's not a Sea Shepherd discovery. It's actually the French scientists who rang the bell in 2017, saying that on average, 3,500 dolphins were killed on the French coast. And at that point, I discovered the issue that has actually been going on for the past 30 years. But starting 2016, it went up, and it went up more and more every year until now. And I have been involved very much for over 10 years in the green that drop in the Faroe Islands. I actually introduced Jens Rasmussen, the whaler that we see in Seaspiracy, to Ali, because when I was in the Faroe Islands, I've had a lot of interesting discussions with Jens. And as you say, the first thing is you want to hate him because he killed whales, but at the same time, he did always respect us for not eating animals. And he's taught me a lot of things I needed to know at that time when I was in the Faroe Islands to actually counter the greens, because we, at the time, Sea Shepherd France had a fleet of small vessels that were deterring the dolphins, the pilot whales, from the hunting bays. So I have a kind of unique, interesting relationship with Jens in that aspect, because yeah, it's a bit paradoxal. But when I realized that in France, on the French coast, in my country, we were actually killing more dolphins than the Faroe Islands and Taiji combined, I was shocked. I thought I had to do something in my backyard. And I realized that it was all happening because even if dolphins are a protected species on the paper, there is no measure to protect their habitat. There is nothing to stop the non-selective fishing methods that are killing on average 300,000 marine mammals every year. And what shocked me was that, because we thought, okay, this is happening. This has been going on for so many years. French people don't know about it. French people do love dolphins. French people eat fish without even thinking about the consequences. So how do we do it to make an electric shock, so to wake up people? And so we started to go on the fishing grounds and we started to film the bycatch, because a lot of fishermen were actually denying they were responsible of the death of dolphins. They were saying that the dolphins that were washing on shore had been killed by storms, or that they were sick dolphins. And the scientists said, no, these dolphins, for over 90% of them, were healthy dolphins. They were young. They were like some pregnant females. And even when you don't see the scratch on their bodies, because most of the time you do see scratches because they try to get away from the nets that they are trapped in, they all have their lung literally explode. I mean, it's such a painful death. It takes a long time for them to die. And the French scientists call it the agony of the deep. So that gives you an idea of how much they suffer. And I thought it's such a long death, such a painful death, and thousands of them. The last numbers are effectively over 10,000. And this is actually a threat to the species, to the dolphins population in the Bay of Biscay. And we started to take dead dolphins and we put them in the city centers. The last thing we did was in front of the National Assembly in Paris, because we knew that the Minister of the Sea was there that day. And we had all the media there, and we had a banner that said, these dolphins are dying so that you can eat fish. Obviously, the Minister of the Sea was very mad at us. But what shocked me is that when we started doing these operations to wake up people, so many people told us, we don't have dolphins in France. I'm like, come on. I mean, we have the second largest marine territory in the world after the United States. France is the only country that has a presence in every ocean. And French people don't know that we have dolphins in France. I'm like, this is insane. How can you feel the loss of something that you don't even know is there? And I thought we have a big, big gap to cross. And when you ask the question, why do you think Seaspiracy is being such an electrifying movie? I think it's also because people are so far from even imagining what is happening in the ocean. And in that aspect, this film is really an eye-opener, because people know like what's happening in slaughterhouses. You know, people feel more for land mammals, but who really cares for what's happening in the sea? Who even imagine like 1% of what's happening in the sea? And this movie is putting it on the table. So we are kind of reaching out to the level that we should have, the level of knowledge that we should have. And I think that's why we are crossing such a big gap. So it has an impact. So many people, I don't know how it is in other countries, but in France, when you say that you don't eat animals, that you're vegetarian, well, they offer you tuna or salmon. I mean, hey, fish are not animals. Look how we set the fishing quotas. We set the fishing quotas in tons. You don't ever dare to talk of tons of giraffes or tons of dogs, but tons of tunas or tons of sharks, that's okay, that's normal. So we are coming from very, very far. And that's the reason why I agree that it would have been great to be able to expand a bit more on how fish sense things, how they are clever, because it's so hard to feel empathy for animals that are so different from us. And that's the reason why I think that's what we are doing here with dolphins is a primary issue, because if we don't manage to save dolphins in a country like France, I don't think we'll be able to save the ocean. It's a too important thing, and I'm hoping that we will manage to shake the statu quo. We are putting a lot of pressure on the French government, and I am hoping that Seaspiracy is going to have the same impact in France as it's having in all other English-speaking countries.
Thank you. Kip, in Seaspiracy, the Plastic Pollution Coalition is a group that envisions a world free of plastic pollution. They are the same group as the Earth Island Institute, who was mislabeling tuna as dolphin safe. Does this explain why they are ignoring plastics from fishing nets? They are not just part of the problem. They have youth ambassadors on their website. How are we going to get them to take plastic pollution from fishing nets seriously when they are deeply connected to the fishing industry?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think part of it too is, even though, you know, the film's called Seaspiracy, and there's definitely an element of conspiracy where conspiring to hide the truth, but a lot of it is ignorance. A lot of it is ignorance, especially in the ocean. Is out of sight, out of mind, and that goes with the the plastic NGOs. A lot of them do good work. You know, the Plastic Coalition, they do a lot of good work. Especially a lot of the plastic cleanup is right on beaches. But so that's a big goal of Seaspiracy, is to open them up like, hey, whether you know about this or not, let's not focus on whether it's a cover-up or not. This is the truth. Let's focus on this. So I feel this is definitely a kick in the tail that they will do this. I mean, cross fingers. You know, in Cowspiracy, we thought Greenpeace, Sierra Club, and Amazon Watch, they would do that right away, and it's taken a while for at least the U.S. organizations. But we just feel, with a lot of pressure from anyone who's watching this, and activists, you know, big way to be an activist is online. You know, give pressure online. You can be a very powerful activist in front of your computer. So that's a huge thing. Just keep on giving pressure, relentless and consistent, and it will happen. They have to. There's going to be another plastic NGO that's going to overtake them, that does talk about it, that's more aligned with it, everyone agrees with, and you can feel the truth. So it's either that they have to do it, or if not, they're going to be left behind in the past with the rest of the failed NGOs that didn't keep up with the times.
Thank you. Phillip, with your Kindness House, you bring together lots of environmental and animal NGOs and activists. How do we get the environmental NGOs to recognize the devastating impact on fishing on plastic pollution and make that this a priority in the work that they do? How do we get environmentalists to promote plant-based diets and food system change?
Well, Nita, you've asked a very important question. Most environmentalists are more concerned about, the forest, and you very rarely get them to see the abject cruelty inflicted on animals, and the need for having the animal kingdom as part of our debate. Excuse me. Goethe said that mankind is motivated not by reason, but by ritual. That's why one of the clauses in our so-called lease agreement at Kindness House was, we had two important clauses. One, if you eat animals in my building, I kick you out. And two, if you have a dog and you don't bring him to the office, we kick you out. Now, one of the things that I would have liked you to have had in your survey is asking the question, what about the morality of killing animals or killing ocean animals? And I don't think Seaspiracy is a film that you should watch once. You should watch it several times because you'll get another message every time you do so. The issues I see coming out of a film like this and out of our broader study of the subject, and they're these. It's plastic, it's poaching, it's poverty, profit, and politics. And these cancers metastasize into corruption, exploitation, money laundering, capital flight, economic collapse, refugees, and violence. Admiral Denny Begin, an American, the chief of US warfighting requirements, said, "We have learned that nations will raid and invade long before they starve." So it doesn't really matter at all whether it's fish, rhino horn, elephant ivory, exotic reptiles, birds, or animals. The same crooks are cogs in the same grinding wheel. But in the ocean, the crimes are ubiquitous because out of sight is out of mind. From cetaceans, dolphins, and whales, to krill and salmon factories, down to the tasteless, tacky, itchy fish tanks we see in private homes. They are just as vile and squalid. And all of them, with no exception, are defended by cheaply bought politicians, profiteers, ignoble minds, and of course, gullible, gluttonous consumers. So it's everybody's fault. A few years ago, I funded and produced a film called The Plastic Cow in India, showing the treatment of cows that are left to graze in rubbish bins in the street after working all day. And we found on an average of between 30 and 60 kilograms of plastic wire and syringes in their stomachs. We had to buy 100 of these cows and operate on them to find out this information. And we found vast amounts of plastic after doing an autopsy on juvenile elephants in the jungle. Plastic in the jungle. But the biggest impact happened with the cows. And we took this case to the Supreme Court in New Delhi. And the judges said something interesting. Plastic poses a greater threat to India than thermonuclear war. Now, that was a very telling statement. But India today, despite it being a predominantly Hindu and Jain country, with over 1 billion people who love and revere the cows continue to be treated abysmally. I wrote a paper on it where I called the brutalized cow. I said she has become this docile, peaceful, loving animal, has now become a scavenging god, turned out in the street to fend for herself before she's abused the next day. And this is in a country where animal rights and the term ahimsa 3,000 years ago from the Upanishads, non-violence to any living being, is enshrined in their national constitution. And India today still owns the world's largest dairy herd and is the largest exporter or the second largest exporter of live animals. So we face a really difficult challenge. We need films like Seaspiracy and activist groups like Sea Shepherd and many others to tackle this vile, hideous, grotesque paradigm that we have at the moment head on and take no prisoners. I'm sorry to speak so forcefully about it, but the time for being passive and benign is long past.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you for always illuminating these major problems so eloquently and urgently. If I can shift the conversation to a spotlight on humans for this last question for this part. In The Guardian, Oceana are saying that they're misrepresented in the film. They said, quote, choosing to abstain from consuming seafood is not a realistic choice for the hundreds of millions of people around the world who depend on coastal fisheries, many of whom are also facing poverty, hunger, and malnutrition. So my question is, do you think that this is in fact the film's argument? Or was the film targeting poor fishing communities, or is it targeting Netflix's audience who can actually make the choice to give up eating fish?
Exactly. It's another poor attempt. When the film came out, we were prepared for a PR attack. A week before the film came out, they officially even announced we were going to attack the facts in the film and doing this big PR campaign before the film even came out. We were prepared for a big backlash. And it was pretty mild because it shows how strong the facts are. And then you see something like this come out. And it's what's interesting about Oceana is Oceana, the exact same interview as in Cowspiracy 8 years ago. And it's something about, how the best way to protect fish is to eat fish. And we even said it in the same way, purposely. And so the thing is, they come up with that, what about all the hundreds of millions of people? Some say up to 1 billion people, which is very high, but say it even is 1 billion people. In the film, we go to Somalia and actually defend the local fishermen. This actually defend them by saying anyone who was watching this film, stop eating fish, and we're not damning anyone who's local fishermen that's indigenous or it's completely essential to their culture. In fact, we protect it. So it's to what you said. I always say is, if anyone who's watching this right now, if you have social media, if you have Instagram, if you have Facebook, if you have Netflix, if you have YouTube, this film is for you. If you don't, and if it's some indigenous tribe that relies on fishing, then it's not for them. So it's just a poor attempt to try to discredit the film. It's about the 7.4 billion people that you can make a choice.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, Anita, you asked a question about environmentalists, generally speaking. If I could briefly just say this. I've been a donor and an activist and volunteer for over 30 odd years, longer than any of you have been alive, I think. And we support some 500 projects in over 40 countries. And like Kip, I read all the objections to your film and all their complaints. I have to tell you, if that was their artillery, they just fired a blank. It was utter garbage, juvenile, adolescent, undergraduate nonsense.
Yeah.
Now, I'm just full of admiration for you guys for doing this, and I'm very grateful, and to you and everyone at Sea Shepherd. Believe me, there is no group, and I happen to know something about this because I've been in it a long time. There is no group like Sea Shepherd. There are indeed many fine organizations who say a disaster is looming, support us, and we will warn the world about it. But at Sea Shepherd, we say a disaster is looming, support us, and we will stop it. Now, that is the difference. I don't just want activists to come out of the woodwork and repeat the same old mantras we've heard in the past. What I'm really hoping for is to kind of find a new breed of activist, if you like, a pro-activist, someone who's willing to get onto the front and confront not just the industry, but the people who grease the wheels, the banks, the insurance companies, the governments, the lobby groups, to take them on, because that's where the real battles are going to be fought.
Thank you. The first call to action on Seaspiracy's website is to shift to a plant-based diet to save the oceans. The interviews with Jackie and Diana from the Plastic Pollution Coalition were so awkward and cringeworthy. Jackie admits fishing is a problem and that we should consider eliminating fishing. And then Ali asks her boss, Diana, why they haven't put this important message on their website. But she becomes very insistent that Jackie didn't say eliminate fish. When Ali says she did, Diana says, I know she didn't. It was almost like a schoolyard spat. And one of the people that have really influenced the animal safe movement is Leo Tolstoy and Gandhi. And both of them said that, to quote Tolstoy, he said, the only true way for a person to improve human life is by way of moral perfection in their personal life. And basically, that is the first step that one needs to take, is look at is self-improvement. And Tolstoy himself wrote an essay called The First Step, where he went to visit a slaughterhouse and bear witness. And then he said, the first step to being a good person is to be an ethical vegetarian. He would say vegan today. So the question is, do you think environmental leaders need to go plant-based and vegan themselves so that they can tackle the truth? And that is, plastics from fishing nets and trawlers and all the other destruction that's taking place in the oceans.
Well, Philip, you want to answer that? But I'll just say, yes, it says, as Howard Lyman says in Cowspiracies, like, it's impossible to be an environmentalist and eat meat, just straight up. You can call yourself what you want, but the information, and especially even 7 years after that film came out, the more data, it's just endless and endless. And now with the ocean, it just doesn't connect. I mean, if you're really looking into connecting the dots and how everything ties back, it funnels just, and it's just so clear now. It's not, that's the thing too, is I think, we'd agree with this, where a lot of people say, oh, being vegan is the final step into my activism, or whether someday I'll get to that point, where right now I'm working on this issue. It's not that it's something to eventually get to. It's the first step, and then get to these other ones. That's why in yoga, the 8 limbs, the first one is ahimsa, the very first one of the yamas. It's not, of the first 8 limbs, of the first of the 8 limbs is ahimsa. You start there, you start the board game of life there. Then you go to step 2. It's not like you go there, number 5, step 5. It begins here, and then you work on all these other things. People think, oh, you think you're vegan and everything solved the world? No, this is just the first step. The first step of compassion is as much as possible. Then move on to the next one. I'm sure Philip has a beautiful answer for that as well.
Yeah, and just before Philip goes, I just wanted to reiterate the idea, like, should we make an effort to convert the leaders of these environmental organizations to go plant-based?
Absolutely.
Like, ethical diet, they will be more likely to tackle the issue. So should we actually have tactics that are geared, like even letter writing campaign or petitions, and calling for the leaders of environmental organizations and their board of directors to go vegan?
Yes, I mean, a long time ago, when organizing how to make these films, it was always, I remember like really meditating on, we're getting in the animal rights movement and just working on looking environmental. Is a lot of people do grassroots, and then like I was thinking, what about gold roots, top down? And to affect the leaders, because they're so influential, whether it's politicians or entertainment leaders. And so that was a big reason why we go to these groups. When we go to the groups, we say, can we interview your CEO? Because when you tap them and there's some awkward interview, we do our best. If you see, when we ask the questions, it's really with compassion. We do it as nicely as possible. The question and the way they answer reveals itself. Oh, you make them look so bad. If they say that, it's just the answer. And so it's really questioning them, and somehow publicly, if you can, in a compassionate way, getting these type of conversations that Al Gore has gotten in a lot. When he came out with Inconvenient Truth, eventually he went vegan. He still doesn't talk about it too much, but I think that's a big one, is having conversation with these leaders, because it's absolutely true. So putting pressure on, whether it's through social media, on whether it's a famous person or environmental leader, just consistently do it. That puts a lot of pressure on them to finally have to align with their ethics and their movement to becoming one, and that's including not eating animals.
I think that's very well put, Kip. Going vegan or getting onto a plant-based diet, we call them a BGO, a blinding glimpse of the obvious. I'm surprised we've even got to have the conversation. Recently I discovered I never actually became vegan. I just woke up one day and realized that's what I was. Fortunately, I didn't ever meet any of the nasty vegan Nazis who wanted to see everything that I did to make sure it was vegan enough for their standards. But I realized my shoes didn't have animal products, or my belt, or my watch band, or my diet. I just discovered one day that I was vegan. Now, nowadays, I spend a lot of my time, COVID permitting, speaking in boardrooms to corporate executives from rather large companies across a variety of industries. And one of the questions I ask is this: what if I could show you a way that your company or you or your family would never be exposed on the front page of the newspaper as being cruel, unethical, or lacking any moral fiber? What would you say if you had your name on the building? How would you behave? What are the decisions you make? How would they be affected if you brought your son or your daughter in to work alongside you every day? Now, let's assume, for example, I could give you this panacea, this magical solution of being an ethical organization. What effect do you think it would have on your company, on your share price? Would it go up or down? What effect would it have on your weighted average cost of capital? Would it help you attract more qualified people to your organization or less qualified? Would it improve your sales, your profit, your margins, or make them worse? Now, any CEO who gets the answer wrong ought to be fired. So if a company decided they wanted to present the image of being an ethical, wholly integrated, well-managed, well-led enterprise, they must have a vegan agenda. I gave a speech to 2,000 very wealthy Indian entrepreneurs in New Delhi, and in the front row was Amartya Sen, who had just won India's Nobel in economics. And after it was over, many of the executives in that room came up to me and said, we're going to turn all our factory canteens vegetarian. Not vegan, because veganism in India is a difficult gig, but they accounted for over 1 million employees. So there is a great deal of power in the leverage of talking to the right people in the right way about subjects that affect them and their businesses. And I think what I'm doing nowadays may help in some small way in that direction.
Thank you, Philip. Anita, in the interest of time, is it okay if we just ask one final question to the panelists and then ask them for their final closing thoughts? Okay, so I think a really important question, I would love to hear from each panelist on this. What can Animal Save Movement and all of our worldwide organizers and participants, or just anyone, what can we do to promote the film most effectively?
I think, well, one, thank you for promoting everyone, especially I think who's watching this, is thank you so much for promoting the film and sharing it and talking about it. So it's just really that. And also just once again, I guess being the armchair activist, where you can do a lot by sharing the film and you know, signing petitions and really doing a lot of effort on, you know, other groups, leaders in the environmental movement or leaders in just period, and just really putting the pressure on of this needs to be discussed and continuing the conversation and opening it up further.
Thank you, Kip.
Okay, I don't know much about promoting anything. As you can tell, I'm completely unqualified to talk intelligently about these subjects, or any other for that matter. But in the past, I know we've all won battles in this particular space against greyhound racing, horse racing, whaling, hunting, live animal exports, even slavery. We've won those battles, but ultimately they've come back. And at Sea Shepherd, we never, ever take anything for granted. Now, I'm sure most of you would have read or have heard about Bertolt Brecht's great parable play, The Resistible Rise of Arturo Ui. He wrote it in 1941, whilst Hitler was still alive. And it's a thinly veiled reference to Hitler in the middle of World War II. And this is long before the US even entered the war. Well, the play ends and the curtain comes down. The tyrant is dead, and Arturo Ui comes out in front of the curtain and takes off his moustache. And he speaks directly to the audience. And he says, "Do not rejoice in his defeat, ye men, for though the world rose up and defeated the bastard, the bitch that bore him is in heat again." What I'm saying is, we have got to be conscious of the fact that these people will come back even after we've beaten them. And the lesson, therefore, is eternal vigilance is the price we pay for liberty. We must be vigilant, keep the pressure on them, continue making these films, because without them, we are well and truly lost. And that prognosis is totally unacceptable to the civilized mind.
Thank you, Philip. I couldn't agree more with you about continuing to be vigilant, and especially in the area of making films. My partner, Sean Monson, is a filmmaker, and anytime he is able to get the support he needs to create a film and get it out there, I know how impactful films are, and it always makes me so happy when that's something that he can do, and the other filmmakers in the movement. It's just always such a joy. So Lamya, what, in your opinion, what can people do to promote Seaspiracy?
Well, it's the same. I don't really know, except by saying that it's a great movie. But I mean, when people do ask me how can we help Sea Shepherd, which is towards the same goal, I always say that even before saying make a donation, because we do rely on donation, I say, if you want to help Sea Shepherd, if you want to help us in our mission, stop eating fish. The fish that's on your plate has a greater role in the ocean. And just to complete about what was being said about the fact of going vegan and stop eating animals, I think it's a tricky one, because it's at least in France, people feel very, very close to the French gastronomy, and what's in your plate is felt as something that's very, very personal, and as soon as you start talking about what's in your plate, then you sound intrusive. And I've been in the position for many years of the one who always loved animals and who always cared about the environment and who was eating animals. I mean, when I joined Sea Shepherd 16 years ago, I was eating fish and meat. And I actually stopped eating fish before I stopped eating meats, which is like, I guess, quite rare. Usually it's the other way around, or it's like everything on the same thing. But anyway, I think the main message is it's easy to be a sort of a hero in this battle, because the only thing you have to do is to give the ocean a break, is just to think, if that fish that's in my plate is not mandatory to my survival, then the best thing I can do for the ocean is to leave it in the ocean, to leave it to those who actually need it for their survival. And that means some of the human beings, a minority of us, who eat fish and need it for their survival. There is enough fish in the ocean for these people. The problem is the majority of people who don't need it and who eat it like they would be eating carrots without any thought. And also for marine predators who cannot have alternatives. So really, I don't know, it's this movie is about what is the greatest threats right now on our own survival. And also, I think there is an image, a thought that we are doing okay because we are over 7 billion and we go into space and we have such a great technology. But what I tell people when we do conferences is there are 3 signs of an extinction of a species, and this is overpopulation, overconsumption of the resources, and to be expanded in all the environments. So basically, if you want to see species facing extinction, you just have to look at yourself in the mirror. So if you have children, or if you care for other people's children, I just don't even understand how you cannot be an environmentalist. And being an environmentalist that's consistent is obviously to stop eating animals. But it's something that's a bit hard to push on people, for sure. So I don't know. I know that here, at least in France, pressure doesn't work. I mean, and it's counterproductive. So it's more how you convince people that, first of all, it's not a luxury thing, it's mandatory. And second of all, there are alternatives that are good for your health, and you are not being punished if you stop eating animals, because there is that thought that yeah, that veganism is such a sad diet. And I think at least in France, if we want to push it forward, we need to develop the alternatives, the vegan alternatives, much more than what it is. I've been amazed for many years when I was traveling, going to Germany or to UK or to the United States, all the choices, the vegan choices that we had. I mean, it was like paradise for vegans. And in France, we are, I think, 15 years back. So yeah, it's definitely the biggest challenge of all, because this is something that we cannot go around, and at the same time, it's something that people are ready to quit using a one-time single plastic use, but to change what's on their plates is much more difficult. So I think it's a mix of pressure in a good way, knowledge, logical, like feel good with yourself. I don't think anyone is happy with himself feeling that he's contributing to destroying the world. So obviously there must be an inside struggle. So you do feel better when you align your behavior with your thoughts. And at the same time, showing that, hey, life is not sad when you quit eating animals. You will feel pleasure eating, and you will be healthy, and it's going to be better for the planet and for our children. So, yeah.
Thank you, Lamya. Anita, did you have any final questions or thoughts?
Just one question about omega-3. A lot of people talk about omega-3 because it's so important for the healthy functioning of the heart, brain, and nervous system. How can we get these essential fatty acids from a plant-based diet?
Well, let's answer that quickly. They actually found out there's for the first plant-based B12 is called in lentine. They just found out it's basically almost like a water lentil. It's almost like an algae. And there's some supplements that are out there. And one of them I'm actually part of, called GLO, G-L-O Vegan. B12 supplements is a very simple one. Actually, I've been vegan 13 years. I've taken B12 supplements 2 or 3 times in my life, one bottle. But it's very easy to do a pill, like super simple. And spirulina, DHA, vegetarian fish oil, chia seeds, right?
And that's without the mercury and all the plastic and all the crap that's in the ocean.
Okay.
Right. The omega-3 fatty acids that the fish are producing are coming from their diet, which is algae for a lot of them. So we can just skip the fish and go straight to the algae. There's plenty of supplements available. And, pre-vegans are no strangers to supplements. Just walk into any health food store and there are miles of supplement shelves full of supplements targeted at them as well. So we can easily get that.
Yeah, and you can also get it from, as Kip mentioned, you can get it from chia seeds, ground flaxseed oil, canola oil, walnut, soybeans, and green leafy vegetables all have the essential acid.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Well, thank you all for being with us today. If you have any final thoughts, we would just love to hear from them. We appreciate your time. We appreciate the incredibly vital work that you are doing for the future of the planet. Thank you again for being here. So, Kip, any final thoughts?
Well, just thank you all so much. I'm a huge fan of Animal Saves. Thank you so much for what you're all doing. We're all doing it together. I just thought of a term inspired by Phillip. Just came up with this one, about vigilance. A new term, compassionate vigilance, a new made-up term for us to work on. And just anyone out there listening, it's been a long road, as Phillip kind of mentioned, and I guess before it was a fight of just the war on compassion. But it's just it can be disheartening sometimes when you see some of these films and what's going on the planet. But just to remember, the time has come that we're finally on the side of momentum. It took a long time. I've been vegan in this movement for 13 years. And up until the past, most people say not until about 5-6 years ago, finally, it's like we're not the weirdos. We're not the ones that people laugh at. You know, every movement has its, was it first you get ignored, then you get laughed at, then you get, you know, your argument. We're at the part where it's fighting and acknowledged, and that's good sign. It's a huge good sign. So we're getting there. We are, you know, if the tipping point isn't about to happen, it already happened. So really, as the fight continues, to enjoy and realize we'll be looking back at this moment that we were part of this shift that's happening at such a incredibly exponential fast rate. And we're at the forefront, and we're all doing it together. So I just want to thank every one of all you and everyone who's listening to helping out, making it happen.
Thank you, Kip. Lamya, I'd love to hear your final thoughts.
I must say that it's true that sometimes you wake up and you see the situation and you can feel like doomed and depressed because things are not necessarily getting fast enough. But I do think that the best way to fight depression is to feel active and to feel part of something. And disconnect yourself from the results, actually, in the end. I mean, it doesn't, of course, you hope that you will have, the positive outcome and that humankind is going to wake up on time. But if we don't, then at least you can go back on your life and say that you have done everything you could. And to me, that's really my motor. That's what makes me go forward, independently of what is happening. And this way, I don't need to be especially pessimistic or optimistic. I mean, it's all about what you know what you have to do your part to try to make this world a better place. So that's extremely motivating, and nothing and no one can take that from you, no matter what is happening all around. So I would encourage everyone to just find the best way for them to participate in what's the most important thing in everything on life is actually to save life. Because so far, the heritage of humankind is not the great things that we think that we're doing. You know, it's not the cathedrals, it's not our technology, it's not our poems, our stories. What we are going to leave behind us is the massive extinction of life. And that's what is going to stay millions of years after us. So let's try to change that fate. I think that's the best thing we can do. And we are a particular generation because we are the last generation that can do something about it. So keep that in mind.
Thank you for highlighting the power that every individual person actually has. And Philip, final thoughts?
Judge White's closing words in The Bonfire of the Vanities were these: "The law is humanity's first attempt at decency." So I ask everybody who's watching this today to join us in a battle, in a war that decency cannot afford to lose. Because in the end, only three things matter: how deeply you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things that were not meant for you. Killing and eating animals was not meant for you. That.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I wanted to draw everyone's attention to the petition on change.org, which is calling on the UK government to create and enforce no-catch marine reserves in at least 30% of UK waters, and over 500,000 people have signed already. And so if you go to the Seaspiracy website, the first call to action is to switch to plant-based, but there's also this petition calling for the creation of these no-catch marine reserves. There's also going to be a number of banner drops encouraging people to watch Seaspiracy. Angus in Bristol, UK, has organized 150 banners to be sent to various locations in Britain and worldwide. At the Animal Safe Movement, we're printing 50 banners, Watch Seaspiracy, that are smaller. His are 10 meters across, so they're for bridges. Ours are smaller, 6 feet for like save squares and vegan outreach. And we're also printing more than 10,000 stickers saying watch Seaspiracy. So there's a lot of things you can do. I think it's really important to share on social media and get all your friends and family to watch Seaspiracy. And because every single person that watches it is a win for the planet.
Well, thanks again, everybody. Go ahead, Anita.
Oh, yes, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, thank you again for being here. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. And we just really appreciate your time. And thank you for your part in the film Seaspiracy. We hope that it continues to be the major impactful paradigm shift that it looks like it's going to be.
Thank you so much for having us on and for doing all your work, everyone. Huge fans of all you.
Take care.
All
Thanks.
right. Thank you. Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.